In this video, we will cover how to install Visual Studio Code, which we can use to write Python code. The prerequisite for using Visual Studio for Python is that we have Python already installed on our computers. I have a video covering how to install Python, but to check that it is installed, open Command Prompt by pressing Windows key and typing CMD. Then press Enter. Then type Python and press Enter. This will bring back the current version of Python that you have installed to your root directory, and shows that you have Python installed. Now, open your browser of choice and in the address bar, type visualstudio.microsoft.com, then press Enter. This will take you to the main download page. If you scroll down, you will see 3 different versions of Visual Studio available. In order to write Python code, we only need the Visual Studio Code version. So, in the drop-down, select Windows and click it. This will download the latest version of Visual Studio Code. Once this has downloaded, either click on the installer in your browser, or scroll to your downloads and double-click on the installer to launch it. On the pop-up screen, accept the installation agreement, and click Next. Then choose the folder that you want Visual Studio installed to. You can just leave this as the default selection, then press Next. Then click Next again to create a shortcut on the Start menu. Here you can choose to create a desktop icon. We want to leave the other 2 options ticked, then click Next. Then finally press Install. This will install Visual Studio on your device. When the installation is finished, press Finish, and launch the application. There are now a few more things we need to do in order to get it working with Python scripts. Firstly, go to the Extensions section, which is on the left-hand side. Now in the search bar, type Python. On the top result, which is published by Microsoft, click Install. This will install Python in Visual Studio. In order to work with Python's shell, and to be able to type into it, we will also need to install a second package. In the search bar, search for Code Runner. Now click on Install for this package. In order to use the Code Runner, we will need to change some of the settings. If you now go to File, then Preferences, then Settings. Then, in the Settings search bar, type Run in Terminal. Now in the search results, scroll down until you come to an option that says Code Runner, Run in Terminal. And make sure that the checkbox is ticked. This now allows us to use the Python shell in Visual Studio. Before the changes are applied, we need to restart Visual Studio by closing it down, then reopening it. To create a new file in Visual Studio, we need to click on File, New File. A dialog to save our file will then appear. In Visual Studio, whenever we want to save a Python file, we have to save it with the extension of .py, otherwise it gets saved as a text file. So, if we called our file visual.test.py, then press Enter, then the file browser will appear. Here you can navigate to wherever you want to save the file. Then press Create File. What we see now is the Python script area. We can write our script in here in the same way that we would in Python's idle. Let's write a simple print statement. Type print, open bracket, apostrophe, hello. Now notice that the end apostrophe and the end close bracket have been typed for us. This is because when we use Visual Studio, it aids our code typing by auto-completing necessary parameters for us. To run the code, we can either press Ctrl, Alt, and N. Or, we can go up to the top right corner and press the arrow button to run the code. Notice how, in the shell window, which is on the bottom of the screen, the word hello is not printed. This is because, in Visual Studio, you have to save the file before running it. So, if we go back to the script, and press Ctrl+S to save, or go to File and select Save, and then run the code again, we can now see the word hello printed to the shell window. We can now use Visual Studio to write Python code, but what are the benefits of using Visual Studio over the default idle that comes with Python? Well, Visual Studio is an IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment. It has a number of built-in features that Python's default idle doesn't, for instance, like we have just seen. It auto-fills out some of the code for us, so we don't need to type the end brackets. This is called IntelliSense. It is used to provide greater insight to the code we write. Auto-complete certain things and validate the code that we write. For instance, in the script window, if we type print, open bracket, var1, notice how a window is displayed that tells us information about what we are typing. Also notice how the var1 value has a red squiggly line underneath it. This is because we haven't declared the variable anywhere else in the script yet. If on the line above, we typed var1 equals apostrophe goodbye, then notice how the squiggly line disappears and the text for the variable name turns blue, to show that it is a variable. This is very useful when writing a long script, and helps us make sense of our code. There are many more options that come with Visual Studio, but for now this completes the setup video. Hopefully this helps you to get Python running within Visual Studio.